let's go then. Okay, it looks like we're pretty small, and so that's good. Maybe we can all introduce ourselves. Can I unmute people?
Hey, Alicia, can you hear me? This is Jim Bullion.
Hey, Jim.
How you doing? Back again.
Yeah. Do you want to just say for the, I know Bill, and I don't know Katie or Bethany, so maybe we could all just say who we are and to begin with.
Yeah, I'm Jim Bullion with the Renew staff and do government affairs. I know Bill and Katie. Don't know Bethany.
Well, hi, I'm Bethany Reinholtz. I'm with GDS Associates. I work on energy efficiency and renewable energy primarily in the agricultural sector. So working with them to determine best practices, best payback, different projects that would work with their size farm and to meet their end use goals.
Did you say GDS, Bethany? Cool, thank you.
Yeah, we're always looking for ways to bring renewable energy to the ag community and rural communities.
And I guess I'm Alicia Leinberger. This is happening because I would love to have this conversation. Oh, Craig, cool. Yeah, because I want to start this conversation. And I've been in renewables for 20 years as a installer on the installer side, and I've been living in Viroqua, Wisconsin for 14 or 15 years now, and I really feel like we're missing an opportunity. There's so much focus put on the investor-owned utilities, especially because they have so many customers. But I've always felt like we have this amazing opportunity with our rural co-ops to kind of lead the way on innovation, because we are run by our members, and that's really the strength to me of a co-op. And so this is kind of, I asked Bill Bailey, who's also on this call and will introduce himself, to have this conversation and start having it publicly so we can work with the co-ops and think about what might be possible, what might work for their members. So yeah, for those of you who are coming on, we're just kind of introducing ourselves. Maybe Bill, could you go next?
Sure, I'm Bill Bailey, Check Bay Renewables. I live up in the northern part of the state, Bayfield, Wisconsin, and our co-op, our local co-op is Bayfield Electric Co-op. Excuse me. I also see that Craig Harms is on, so I'd like him to introduce himself pretty soon too here. But basically, our electric co-op had a net metering policy, which they dropped this last February. And so now anything that is generated in excess is paid off at Dairyland Power's avoided cost, which presently is about 2.1 cents. And it has pretty much stopped most of the renewable energy in our service territory. And I would like to have the conversation in general about what the value of distributed energy resources are. Net metering in our area is 12 to 14 cents, depending on the time of the year. Avoided cost is 2 cents. There's got to be a middle road between there that's equitable to both the members of the co-op and the generation or the distribution facility. So that's who I am, and I enjoy this conversation.
Thanks, Bill. Let's just go through. Katie, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Katie Malcheski. I'm a project developer with Sunvest Solar, and we work with primarily commercial customers, and I'm just here to learn about how we could extend our services from more of the commercial and industrial to perhaps some more of the rural type of customers throughout our state.
Great, thank you. And Craig, it's nice to see you here.
Yeah, and this is Craig Harms. I'm Manager of Business Development for Darrell and Power. And I work with our 24 member cooperatives in a 4-state area, assisting them with their renewable energy efforts.
How many are in Wisconsin of Dairyland?
14,
14, okay.
I'm sorry, 18.
18, okay.
Yeah.
Great. So I guess I don't really have an idea for, well, I mean, I think we could go about it in a number of ways. We could begin talking about, and maybe Craig, you could be really helpful, but I guess for me, one of the things that makes it difficult for us to think about how we can grow renewables along with the co-ops is the variability between them. We work with, in the Driftless area, we work with, I think, 4 different co-ops, and they all have different policies, different tariffs, different ways of handling it, and it makes it confusing. And then as Bill noted, we've had the experience as well where they've changed policy with very little input from the members, or really consideration of what is the value to the members of renewables generated within the distribution system. And so I guess I want to just, maybe we can start there and talk about how that uncertainty plays out in rural areas, and how we might be able to work on kind of creating some sort of, I don't know, some sort of conversation around standardizing and really considering the value of the distributed generation. Anybody have thoughts about that? How we can go about it?
Well, I think the place to start, first of all, is to recognize that each one of these electric cooperatives, and of course, electric cooperatives are member owned, and each member has a voice in their cooperative, and they elect a board of directors at each of these electric cooperatives. So the place to start would be to talk to the board member that represents you on that cooperative's board of directors. But in general, in the state of Wisconsin, of course, the cooperatives are not mandated to follow any state requirements as they currently stand in terms of net metering, but they voluntarily participate up to 20 kW. So that's kind of where many of them are. And then in terms of what they might pay for any power that's put back onto the grid, in other words, excess energy from a member-owned installation, that again would be determined by the board. But in many cases, again, they're looking to government regulation, whether that's federal regulation, which right now says that that would be the Public Utility Regulatory Policies Act, PURPA, which states that the utility must purchase that energy at it can purchase that energy at its avoided cost. In other words, market pricing out there. In the state of Wisconsin, the state doesn't really speak to that in terms of co-ops. So they, again, mandate up to 20 kW, and the co-ops voluntarily, most of those co-ops voluntarily participate in that. But the co-ops are also very careful about any cross subsidization. So any decisions that are made must be made for the entire membership, for the benefit of the entire membership. So that's where most of those board of directors are coming from. So that again brings you back to speaking, knowing who your director is and speaking to your board. And as you know, as Bill has pointed out, you know, contacting your electric cooperative and just you know, again, providing them with your opinion and reasoning. I think that's respected on the part of that co-op out there.
Craig, in my experience, often when we try to speak with and people that people that we work with in the region too, when they try to speak with their representatives on the co-op, often they don't seem to really even understand the idea of net metering or on-site generation, or they're certainly not able to explain why the kilowatt hours that the members are generating are being compensated the way they are. You know, for example, we have Scenic Rivers Co-op in our area, and their current policy is they don't, I guess you could call it kind of net metering, but it's in 15-minute intervals. So anything that you send back in a 15-minute interval, I think this is how you guys are in Bayfield too, right, Bill? Now?
It's moment by moment. Anything, it's the
Yeah.
meter is a bidirectional meter. Anything that goes back one direction, you buy, the other direction, they pay for you at avoided cost. That's the way I understand.
So Craig, I guess one of the problems with that idea is I think we all really believe strongly in the power of the membership and member control and co-ops. But when the board of directors can't even explain to you, much less, I should say, they don't even really understand it, much less be able to explain why you're being compensated at that rate. It's difficult to have a conversation. So what kind of education is done for those directors to help them be able to have that conversation in a meaningful way?
Well, I would say, first of all, it's important, of course, to voice your opinion or concern to your co-op director, but they, of course, as you might expect, are no different than any other member out there in terms of overall knowledge concerning various aspects of the operations. When you dive into the rate making and that kind of thing, they look to the cooperative staff to help them to understand that. So I would say that if you're looking for an explanation or an understanding of what that cooperative's policy is, in this case, Scenic Rivers, that you should probably contact the electric cooperative and ask to speak to somebody there concerning the cooperative's distributed generation policy. And I'm sure that person can help you understand the policy and why it is what it is.
Hey, Craig, or anybody else that might know, I keep seeing this avoided cost number of 2 cents, 2.2 cents, whatever the number is. Where does that number come from? Because, you know, Bill, especially in your case, when you've got a net metering that's going backwards and forwards at various times, it's spinning backwards most often when the energy is at the most premium. You know, it's the hot summer days, the sun's shining, it's at that peak time at 4 or 5 in the afternoon. I mean, do the utilities, is that like an average number, or is the actual value of those electrons actually more expensive on the grid if it truly was a free market? I'm trying to understand how that number plays into the real world of buying and selling energy.
Right, it is market based. So the way it's determined is we're looking at the actual hourly market pricing out there. And the payment that's made to the member is the sum for each month of the hourly pricing for the hours that energy was delivered to the utility.
Is it's the average for the month, or because
It's the average of the hours that energy purchases were made.
from each meter, or for everybody overall? I guess
From each meter.
really.
Yep. Yep.
Huh. It just seems like that's like the lowest rate out there at, middle of the night kind of a rate, but maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, in the case of Scenic Rivers, the folks who are generating we know that electron is leaving their home and going, not very far down the line, and is getting sold at 11 cents. And so it feels, I guess I'm just kind of saying out loud what I hear from folks who have generation. I imagine Bill is experiencing the same thing. And I will say that we've gotten a lot better at communicating with Vernon Electric Co-op. They've been really great at starting to have these conversations. And but I guess, Craig, I really, and to everyone, what I'm interested in doing is figuring out how can we together help educate the boards. So, because I feel like that we're missing, this is the opportunity that we're missing, to have board members, like you're saying, Craig, they're just regular members. Okay, well, that's fine. But I would prefer to have people, it's just like I don't want legislators that are just regular people. I want legislators that are really interested in understanding policy and being able to make informed decisions, both so that they can have informed conversations with their constituents, but also so that when they turn around and make policy, they understand how that's going to impact all of the members. Because I personally, I'm not so sure that this current policy of really acting like somehow the solar generation is so much less valuable than the retail that they're selling is in the long term going to be the best for rural electric co-ops. So I guess I'm asking folks here, what do you guys think? Do you think it would be helpful to have some sort of, like we have a Wisconsin Electric Co-op organization, and would it be helpful to have more involvement, and how can we imagine that happening so that we're having more conversations between the sectors, rather than and hopefully reaching out to those directors so that they do become more informed.
I want to point out that I did not mean to indicate that those directors are not educated or not informed, because they are. But as you can understand, it's the staff people that work in those areas day to day that are your best sources for information concerning policies and rates and so on and so forth.
So when you say that, Craig, how are they informed? Like what kind of education are they receiving about distributed generation?
Every co-op is different, but there are, of course, state and national educational opportunities available for those directors to help them advance in their understanding of the business in all areas, not just in, of course, renewable energy, including net metering. And then, of course, the co-op itself I'm sure they also may provide some opportunities for their board of directors, just educating them more locally concerning why that particular co-op has the policies that they do and how they were developed.
Alicia, I'd like to just throw this out there. There's a certain mystery around our particular co-op. I've been involved with the co-op on a committee, and I know a certain amount of information, but there's a lot of information that I don't know as far as how the co-ops work and stuff. And one of the things that we were interested in, that we've asked our board for and the employees for, is they're undergoing a rate study at present. And that rate study, they use that information to determine whether they need to raise the rates or not. And so that study has in it, well, I don't really know exactly what it has in it because I haven't ever seen it. So I asked our co-op if they would share that with me as a member. And they said that they would share a redacted version, but we haven't ever seen even that. And I don't understand why they wouldn't share the whole thing. We're a member, and this is a co-op. This is not a corporation that's got proprietary information or anything. Why is something as basic as the finances hidden from the members? Or maybe they will share it down the road. I don't know, but we've been asking for 4 or 5 months now for this rate study. It was supposed to be done in September. We haven't seen anything yet. And I just don't understand the mystery behind this. Why can't the members get information about this? So, and Craig, I don't want this to be back and forth between you and me. And I feel almost sorry for you that you're representing.
No,
you know,
I'm
all the
so
board.
grateful that you're here, Craig.
No, we are.
Otherwise, I'd be wondering, and you're
I
like,
personally know Craig. I'm a good friend of Craig's, and I don't mean to put him on a spot, but I just was wondering what his take on why would a co-op not share this with their members?
And Bill, just curious, do you know, are they doing the rate study in-house? Most co-ops will generally contract out a rate study or a rate case study.
Yeah, it's contracted out to the engineering company in Madison, PSC, or the Power Systems Engineering.
And my company does a lot of rate studies and rate cases. And I can tell you the vast majority of people I would send that information to would look at it, throw it away, and be like, I have no idea what I'm looking at, what any of it means. And it would be, unless you have done those studies and spent time looking at them, they can be pretty bizarre to look at and try to understand. So
right. And our co-op has told us that we wouldn't understand it, so we're not going to give it to you. And maybe that's a valid excuse, but I have a feeling that there's some of us out there that could actually read the things.
I feel though they should be willing to at least give you the kind of overall summary of what the study came to. Maybe not all the details, because that's a lot of documents and a lot of information and a lot of spreadsheets to pull together. But at least the findings of those studies should be, I would imagine, should be available. But it is overwhelming for the folks that haven't seen them or dealt with them.
I think here's one of the, I mean, I'm interested in Craig's take too. Actually, Craig, do you have thank you though. That was really helpful coming from the creators of the studies. Did we lose him? He's muted.
No, you haven't lost me. I was waiting for your question.
Oh,
what specifically was your question?
Yeah, what's your take? Because we have the same situation. I mean, when they changed the net metering policy here, after the fact, we had a couple of meetings and they wouldn't provide us the background information about why, they said, oh, it's because of the numbers and solar customers are being subsidized by other customers. And I was like, well, I want to see the numbers. I want to be able to understand what are the numbers that you're using. And they wouldn't do that. And so curious, Craig, why is it like Bill's asking, why is it such a secret? You know, all of the numbers behind why you're making policy decisions.
Right, I can't speak for those individual co-ops, but I would anticipate that, again, you know, they're using a consultant, a national consultant, to do this work, and that is very, I would say, somewhat proprietary, and I think they have a responsibility to somewhat control that information, and at the same time, I believe they have a responsibility to share their findings. And I can't speak for each of these co-ops here, but I believe that in most cases the co-ops will, you know, provide some level of explanation based on the consultant results on why they are implementing and adapting certain policies. So again, it may be a case of just simply not, as Bethany said, of just simply not wanting to provide more information than is really necessary, and that might get out of control. So you know, that's basically how I understand it, is just having control over certain information in the cooperative. I don't think they're trying to hide anything at all. They're just trying to be responsible.
Alicia, why don't I throw out one other concept? I think that it would be nice to see the rate studies. I think it would be at least a summary of them. I think it would be nice to know what a distribution co-op is paying for electricity from the generation co-op. And the reason why I say that is when my 12-cent electricity goes back into the neighbor down the road and it gets goes from 2 cents to 12 cents. Well, there's got to be some other economic justification for this. What it's going to force the industry to do, or the homeowner to do, well, one thing they can do is get batteries and try to keep more of it behind the meter. As battery prices come down, that might be an option. But there's other options that might be available. And I'm going to just throw this out there, but there's got to be something that you can do with 2-cent electricity that's more valuable than giving it to your neighbor at 12 cents. And that's not necessarily good for the environment. What's good for the environment is to give the 2-cent electricity back to your neighbor for 12 cents. And then that's great for the co-op because they're making all this money. But if the people actually view the economics, they would be much better off just to keep that electricity behind their meter and do something else with it. And whether that is Bitcoin mining or splitting hydrogen or whatever, those are going to be the things that the co-ops are going to force the issue. And people aren't going to stand for this inequity. And it's way beyond subsidizing. The co-ops are concerned that the solar people are being subsidized. It's exactly the opposite when you have 2-cent electricity going down out back at the meter and they're making all the profit on it. The solar people now are subsidizing the non-solar people. And I don't understand why that the distribution co-ops and the generation co-ops don't understand that very simple math. And I'll get off my soapbox here.
I think that's helpful. And that is part of the reason why I really would like to see the co-op share the rate studies in their entirety. I mean, we do have folks that are either they're retired utility workers or they're electrical engineers that are dedicated to this, that can read those rate studies. And what we want to understand is, basically, if we can understand why that it needs to be 2 cents instead of 12 cents, well, then we'll figure out how to work with that. But if we would like to be able to question some of the underlying assumptions of the rate studies, I mean, that was my feeling when they gave us a few numbers when they changed the net metering policy overnight without any input from members. The underlying assumptions that they had gave us were just wrong. And unless we had that, we didn't have an opportunity to question it ahead of time, and it was already in policy. But if we can't even have those conversations, then you do end up creating a situation where members don't feel like that it is their co-op. And as Bill said, people will start pulling off of the grid altogether, and then that creates whoever's left. It creates an inequity with whoever's left has to foot more of the bill of just keeping the distribution system going. So I feel like I really feel like, again, like we're missing this opportunity to use the strengths of a co-op and have more open conversations. And yeah, I'm just looking for more. We had a couple more people. It looks like Aaron Benson. But I also want to open it up and see if Bethany, did you have any other thoughts, or Katie? Or Jim? Jim, you're muted.
You'd think I'd have learned that after 9 months of doing this stuff. Actually, my screen was a little bit blocked because I was looking at, I had just pulled back up, the Public Service Commission is doing a generic investigation of parallel generation purchase rates for investor-owned utilities. That'll give us a lot of interesting information and numbers. And at the end of that process, I would hope that not only the IOUs, but co-ops and munis will all look at that and say, well, maybe we need to take another look at everything that goes into the value of solar, and whether it's minute by minute or month by month, what is a fair compensation for the people that are investing in this energy generation that's going onto the grid, that the ratepayers aren't paying for that hardware to put those electrons on the local grid that helps support the local grid. So it's certainly controversial, and I know that everybody's got a little different take on it, but there's real numbers out there and some hard science, I think, that we can look at the benefits of it. And I think that study will go a long way towards identifying what those numbers really should be.
And I think that study will also help people to understand, who are trying to understand all those rate cases for the renewable production, because we have to keep in mind, all these little co-ops aren't necessarily producing their own energy. They're buying it from the IOUs to resell it. So that cost that they're incurring, and they're trying to keep very minimal to pass on to members. But, a lot of it comes down to, what is the IOU charging them for electricity that they have to pass along? And they're maintaining these rural lines, and there's a lot of things that go into it. So trying to bear in mind, we're not necessarily, I'm part of a rural electric co-op, and they used to purchase our electricity from Wisconsin Public Service. Well, they had enough of their rates, and now we are purchasing from Minnesota Power. But they have a lot more renewables on the line. So something else to keep in mind is, if you're not happy with it, that co-op doesn't have to purchase from that IOU. They have an option to finish that contract and move on, which might be a better option across the board if the little investigation is done.
Bethany, what's your co-op?
I'm with Oconto Electric Co-op.
Huh.
And about 2 years ago, they quit purchasing from WPS and went to Minnesota Power, specifically because Minnesota Power had so much renewables on their line. And we're going to try to go to 100% renewable and carbon free. And our members in the co-op wanted that renewables. So they made that switch.
That's an awesome example. And it brings something else up that that I've thought about with Dairyland, since so many of our co-ops are Dairyland co-ops, and my local co-op, Vernon Electric, is, it's hard when people who are putting in generation on site, or businesses that want to put in generation on site, are seeing, and they're getting those kind of rates. Vernon Electric is a little better than Scenic Rivers, I'll say, but it's hard when you see then Dairyland going out and building large solar installations. And Craig, I think I saw you on a municipal call, and you mentioned how many megawatts of solar that Dairyland was putting in, and so everyone is wondering how do you say on one side that like all the other customers are subsidizing these solar customers, and on the other hand, you're going out, for Vernon Electric, for example, has 800 kilowatts of solar right next to their headquarters. And so they're saying that that's valuable, and yet that one of their members isn't. And something that you said, Bethany, also clicked, like, co-ops buying from generators that are way outside of their region also takes that money right outside of the region and keeps it somewhere else in somebody else's hands. And in case if they're buying from IOUs, it's into the hands of shareholders. And you contrast that with, are we actually considering the value of keeping the money within your distribution network when you're instead purchasing from parallel generation or distributed generation within your network? It's hard to see how all of those values square up with each other. And I just feel like this is a conversation we need to be having, and instead we're having it in people's kitchen tables, and there's not really an opportunity to have this have the conversation in a big way. So
I think the bottom line here is the value of solar, the value of renewables, but particularly the value of solar here, because that's what we're really talking about, is a debatable subject, as certainly Bill will attest to. And so there needs to continue to be discussion on this, ongoing discussion, which there is, and the Public Service Commission is going to take up. But the concept that I believe Bill is talking about is only being implemented, as I understand it, in Minnesota right now. And there's talk about other areas, but it's not a widely used, adapted concept around the country. And that doesn't mean that Wisconsin can't be the first, but it is still a very new subject. And I do want to clarify that Dairyland Power generates power. We are a generation and transmission cooperative that provide power to those Wisconsin member cooperatives. We sell all of our power into the MISO market. So it's all sold into the market. And then we buy all of our power needs back from the market. And that avoided cost that we're paying, that 2 cents average, is, I think that's a lot of wind energy. That's affecting why that rate is so low. That's one reason, which is a good thing, that wind energy is as low as it is. And I just want to point out that currently co-op policy is that I think it's pretty well established around those member co-ops that it is good to encourage the member out there to size to load and not to oversize their facility so that they're selling back to the utility. Now, maybe that thinking will change, but what they're doing right now with that policy is trying to protect members from overpaying for energy. And again, the value of solar is still a debatable approach to this, and one that will continue to be discussed and will also be ongoing consideration by Darylyn's member cooperatives, as well as the consultants, the rate consultants that they work with.
Do you think that Dairyland might be open to having that conversation? Because I think you could make an argument that the value of solar within Dairyland's customers is different than the value of solar within the IOUs. Just because of what we know about the kind of the nature of rural co-ops. Do you think that we're at a point where Dairyland might be open to having to starting a study like that?
Well, Darylyn is not the purchaser here. It is the co-op. They are the retail service provider. So the value of solar is going to vary by utility, because it may vary by utility because of the components of that calculation. And of course, the value of solar equation may vary from state to state, but that is some of what we're facing there. And I'm sure that's part of what the Public Utility Commission will be examining as they go.
Alicia, do you mind if I chime in here for a second?
Please.
Yeah, so I'm Jared. I'm with Next Step Energy. We're out of Eau Claire.
Hi, Jared.
Yeah, and so I've heard of Ethos Green Power, and Bill, you're up there in Bayfield, you said. And kind of similarly, we work with a bunch of different co-ops, and they all have different rate and tariff schedules and policies. And like you said, it can be really confusing, but it kind of sounds like culminating this conversation is really, we need to be inviting those co-ops to the table to have conversations with. And it sounds like there's like the rural co-op community or like an association, right? But
yeah,
I think putting ourselves out there, we're installers, right? So we have one perspective, and we talk with our customers who have a different perspective, and and we encourage our customers, that are on poor rate schedules or have bad discouraging policies to reach out to their board of directors and their co-ops directly. But maybe us kind of organizing in a sense to offer that resource of education to board of directors or to the co-ops, and then also like corresponding or correlating with Craig or other resources to kind of present what they're finding through the PSC and the IOU rate cases. So potentially, because ultimately it comes down to those co-ops and their leadership and their members and how they are what they're gonna do or change, or it's up to them, right? And
right.
And us as an installer, we're not a member, so all we can do is present an education or present an opportunity to have a conversation. But if it's particularly like us and you and maybe Bill, because we're kind of in the same region in northwestern Wisconsin and western Wisconsin, trying to reach out to those utilities and like trying to invite them to the table for our conversation. And it's going to be a conversation, right? It's going to be a long, not necessarily long-winded, but it's going to take a while for change to happen. But I'd be interested in helping with those conversations and presenting some of the information we
Awesome.
find out.
Yeah, and I can think of, I think you're right, Jared. I think that there's a lot of value to even just having the discussion and understanding more where they're coming from. And then maybe there's a piece of information that we can add that changes the way they look at it. And I'm certain that it'll change the way I look at it. Like, I know just in the conversations with Vernon Electric Co-op, over the past year, we started an energy district in Vernon County, and Vernon Electric has been very active, and that it was amazing to see that we have so many common goals, and also to understand, like, for them, the demand factor, at least in Vernon Electric territory, is huge, and it's costing them money. And to see that, well, actually, as installers and people who understand storage, we can help, we can work together and solve some of those problems. And I really do think that if we can, this is my kind of ask to Craig is, can we have Dairyland be encouraging of that? Like, Dairyland is sort of, it's the co-op of co-ops, right? So if they are hearing from Dairyland that, hey, this is a good thing, we should start opening these conversations. We don't have to be afraid of our members also wanting to generate their own power, that this can turn out to be good for all the members. We could end up actually lowering the cost of electricity, or at least stabilizing it with the help of these folks. I understand from also, what happened in Vernon Electric territory is a few people were abusing the 40 kilowatt full retail net metering. And one person who didn't even live here did it. And that's not what we as installers, we've always respected that, what you said, Craig, like size to the load. But this one person did it, and the reaction was to kind of go totally the other way. And I just feel like I can understand that reaction, but we do. I think that there's a lot of room in the middle where we can end up being very beneficial to each other. And Bill, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I got one thing I want to throw in before we run out of time. I just put in the chat window our nonprofit's web address, checkbayrenewables.org. And on there last September, we did a study of the Wisconsin co-ops. And the subject was primarily what the net metering policy was of all the co-ops in the state, and who, what the average is, what most of them are doing or whatever. And one of the concepts within there is the value of solar that Craig talked about a few minutes ago. And I think that's the primary conversation that we all need to have. That's what the Public Service Commission is all about. But the co-ops, not being regulated, they need to have their own conversation as to what the value of solar is. And the Minnesota formula, part of what's in there is based on location. In other words, the electrons at the node that Dairyland Power has on the MISO market is not the same value of electrons that they are coming out of my solar system and going back onto the grid, because there's all those transmission factors that are involved in there. The electricity that I'm putting back on the grid is getting used up by the first neighbor down the road. So anyway, the conversation about the value of solar is something that we need to have. I offer our research project that we did as a beginning point. It's certainly not all the answers or anything, but we did spend a lot of time trying to put it together, and I would offer it to the entire group that it might be a point that we could jump off onto into a more statewide conversation.
Yeah, I think that would be one very important conversation. A couple more that I can think of just from our work with our energy district. One is the demand factor and figuring out how within the distribution regions of the different co-ops, how we can help the members kind of come together to make sure that we're not hitting these humongous peaks that are very expensive. So learning some behavioral ways and maybe some technological ways of flattening that demand. Another one is I think that the rural co-ops could be really an important part of is in our work to help with the challenges of climate change. We realize that we're going to have to electrify everything, and really to get off of fossil fuels, we have to take everything that's currently run by fossil fuels and electrify it. And that is going to increase the total amount of electricity that we need to be able to supply to members, and also potentially to be able to turn it around and have the co-ops be selling into the urban areas, into the IOUs, and actually making money off of it, getting revenue off of that, because we have the land and where we can put up the solar. And so the electrification as well, I think, is a conversation that we should be having now, so that we're not, regretting it later that we didn't build correctly to handle the electrification of our society over the next 10 years or so. So yeah,
I would just like,
thanks. Yeah, Craig.
I would just like to again emphasize that our co-op's policies aren't made in a void, and they aren't necessarily made locally there without the assistance of nationally known consultants, in this case, rates, as we're talking about, and also with legal counsel, acknowledging that there are government regulations out there. So it's a combination of various entities that are helping make these policies and setting these rates. And if you want more input on that, as our one participant offered here earlier, I would suggest that you start with the Wisconsin Electric Cooperative Association, WECA.
Yep.
Steve Freeze is the executive there, the CEO of the Wisconsin Electric Cooperative Association.
That's a fantastic suggestion. I think you're right. When Bill and I were talking about this session a couple of weeks back, I didn't even understand that organization existed, and he pointed me to it. And it seems like a really great place to start. I know that our local GM at Vernon Electric is on the board there. And so I thought I would talk with him and see what he thinks about starting this conversation. And I think as well, like maybe Renew Wisconsin, Jim, could be involved. And
yeah, we work with Steve Freeze. We're both members of the Customers First Coalition, and I've known Steve for many years. He's a former state legislator, so I'd be glad to reach out and make the initial contact to see if he's got some members that would like to have like a small group to start the conversation. We don't need 20 people at the table to start.
Yeah. I mean, I think Vernon Electric might be interested, just because we've been having these energy district conversations, and Craig Harms is sorry, not Craig Harms, Craig Burrows, different Craig, is very
That's my other brother, Craig.
Right. Well, he's a great guy, so it's great that
He is.
Yeah, that he's very he's very interested in thinking about all sorts of different ways, and I think I don't know, Craig, what do you think? I feel like it's starting to become there's a little bit of a conversation like, hey, maybe we can change our business structure somewhat and be more flexible, and it'll help. But because the co-ops don't have to go through, the rate cases, and it's not so stiff, that they can be more flexible. Maybe we can be leaders in the innovation.
Well, certainly there's always that opportunity and that interest in being leaders. But we want to make informed decisions and decisions that benefit the maximum of our cooperative members and make sure that everybody's treated fairly and equally, because that's what we're all about as cooperatives.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's 2:57. I really want to thank all of you for coming, and I'm really grateful, Craig, that you clicked in here, because your perspective is at least as far as I'm concerned, because I'm connected to Dairyland, and also I think your experience shows. I think that probably all the co-ops are somewhat informed by what Dairyland does. So thank you for bringing that, and Bill for doing all of your deep thinking and bringing that to the conversation. Jim, of course, for being part of Renew, and all of you, the people that we just sort of started talking. And I would say I'm at Ethos Green Power. If anybody wants to get in touch, I'm also on the board of Renew Wisconsin right now. So get in touch with Jim at Renew as well in terms of organizing going forward.
Yeah, Alicia and I will follow up too with Bill and you and Steve Freeze, and I'll keep Jennifer Schilling and Craig in the loop too on, what are the next steps to do here, and when we can start the conversation. I know between COVID and everything else, people have some tough things to take care of, but we'll get it going on this conversation.
And I can be reached at our website, which I put in the chat box, the web address.
Sounds good.
And Jared, we'll just we'll find you at Next Step. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.